Have you ever stopped to think about one of the most famous verses ever written? What if I told you that we might have been misunderstanding it for centuries? In this explainer, we're going to uncover a hidden history that shows how a simple shift in context, well, it changes absolutely everything. It's a huge question, I know. It really challenges an assumption that's been standing for, nearly 2,000 years now.
Think of it like this. What if we've been trying to open a lock with the wrong key this whole time? What if the key we thought fit this famous passage actually doesn't? Okay, so first things first. Let's look at the verse itself, the one that pretty much everyone knows, and then we'll break down the standard way it's been explained for almost 2 millennia. And there it is. You've probably heard it a million times. The profound, powerful opening of John's Gospel. I mean, this verse is a massive cornerstone of Christian theology. It has shaped how literally millions of people understand the nature of Jesus. All right, so here's the standard account. The explanation you'll get in most classes or sermons is that the author John did something really clever. He supposedly used this well-known Greek philosophical term, logos, as a bridge. The idea was to connect with a Greek-speaking audience, to make his message about Jesus understandable to the wider Hellenistic world. And people have called it a brilliant move, a masterful piece of cross-cultural communication. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, what if that's not the whole story? What if the real key to unlocking this verse isn't Greek at all? What if it's been hiding in plain sight, right inside the author's own Jewish world the whole time? So, to find it, we need to shift our focus. We're leaving the philosophical lecture halls of Athens behind, and we're heading to the synagogues of first-century Judea. This is crucial because this is where scriptures weren't just read in Greek or classical Hebrew, they were heard and discussed in the everyday language of the people, Aramaic. And if we want to find this Aramaic key, we have to talk about something called the Targums. So what are they? Well, they were basically Aramaic translations and paraphrases of the Hebrew Bible. The average Jewish person at the time would have heard these read out loud every single week in the synagogue. This wasn't some dusty academic text. This was their living, breathing scripture. Now, inside these Targums, a very special word keeps popping up over and over again, memra. Now, on the surface, it translates to word, but it is so much more than that. Think of it as a special term, a kind of stand-in for the visible, active, on-the-ground presence of God. It was a way to talk about God walking and speaking and making covenants, without making God seem too human, which was a big theological concern. Okay, so check this out. Look what happens when we swap the Greek concepts for their original Hebrew and Aramaic ones. The word becomes the memra, and God becomes Elohim, which is a word that can actually refer to any spiritual being, not just the one true God. So the verse is now saying that the memra was with the unique Elohim, and get this, that the memra was equal to this unique Elohim. Whoa! All of a sudden, the meaning gets laser-focused and incredibly specific. And you have to understand, for a first-century Jewish person listening to this, the memra wasn't some vague philosophical idea, not at all. The memra was a familiar character from their stories. It was the memra of the Lord walking in the Garden of Eden. It was God's memra that made the covenant with Abraham. It was the memra that promised to support Moses. It was, quite literally, God in action. And here's the thing. This idea of the memra wasn't some weird one-off concept. It actually fits perfectly inside a much larger and honestly pretty shocking theological framework that was already floating around in ancient Judaism. This is a great way to see it. Scholars have a term for this, binitarian monotheism. Sounds complicated, but it's pretty straightforward. It's the idea of one God, but a God who shows up in 2 different ways, or 2 modes. So on one hand, you've got the invisible, transcendent God, the Father, the one nobody can see. But then you also have the visible, active God who shows up in history. This is the figure sometimes called the angel of the Lord, or, you guessed it, the memra. This is the God who literally eats a meal with Abraham. So this is the absolute key takeaway. The early Christians weren't just inventing a second God out of thin air. That would have been blasphemy. No, what they were doing was taking a theological idea that was already part of their Jewish heritage, this idea of a visible second Yahweh, and they were saying, hey, that divine figure, we've met him, and his name is Jesus. Okay, so now that we have this idea of the memra in our heads, let's see how it completely transforms another famous verse from John's opening. It takes what seems like a simple statement and turns it into the climax of this epic cosmic story. So, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We read that all the time, right? But that little word dwelt, we usually just skim right over it. But in the original Greek, the word is eskinosin, and it means something way more specific. It literally means to pitch a tent or to tabernacle. Now, that word choice is so intentional. It's not an accident. It's a direct callback to the idea of the Shekinah, that glorious, physical, visible presence of God that filled the tabernacle in the wilderness and later the temple in Jerusalem. You know, the pillar of cloud and fire. And when you understand that, it creates this incredible three-act play at the heart of Israel's entire story. Okay, Act 1, God's glorious presence, the Shekinah, descends and dwells with his people in the tabernacle. It's amazing. Act 2, tragedy strikes. The prophet Ezekiel has this vision where he watches that very glory get up and leave the temple. For centuries, that glory is gone. But then, Act 3, John 1:14, John announces the spectacular return. The Shekinah glory is back. But this time, it's not tabernacling in a building made of stone or a tent made of animal skins. It's tabernacling in a human body. All right, let's pull all these threads together now. The memra, the two Yahwehs, the Shekinah glory, and see the final, just breathtaking picture that John is painting in his grand finale.
So he finishes with this verse. Now, you might know a version that says only begotten son, but if you look at the best and earliest manuscripts, they say something different, something much stranger. The phrase is monogenes theos, and that translates to something more like the unique, one-of-a-kind God, or even the species unique God. So this isn't saying Jesus is some kind of lesser junior God. Not at all. It's identifying him as that visible second Yahweh figure from his own Jewish tradition, the memra, who is God in a totally unique way that no angel or any other being is. He's the one who can finally fully explain the invisible God. He is, in a sense, the exegesis of God for all humanity. So what's the big picture here? The big takeaway is that John's prologue probably isn't a piece of Greek philosophy that's just kind of tacked onto a Jewish faith. No, it's something much deeper. It's the ultimate culmination, the grand finale of Israel's own story about its God, who he is, and how he finally chose to reveal himself to the world. And this whole journey leaves us with a pretty cool question to chew on, right? If a verse this famous, this foundational, could be hiding such a different meaning, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other ancient ideas are just sitting there, waiting for us to rediscover them, just beneath the surface of the words we thought we knew so well?